I'm Dan Foliart. I'm currently the Writer Co-Chair of ASCAP. And I am sitting with my good friend Alan Bergman, and who, along with his wife Marilyn, have written some of the greatest songs of all time. And I got to be honest with you, I started looking about all the things that you've accomplished. We could be here for an hour just talking about all the accomplishments, but you've written some of the most, memorable lyrics of all time, and married with some of the great melodies. But just a few things. You're a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame since 1980. 16 Academy Award nominations. I can't even believe that. And you got 3 of them for the Windmills of Your Mind, The Way We Were, and the score for Yentl.
We got lucky.
Yeah, you didn't get lucky. I'm looking up here. We can't see them in this shot, but all these Oscars and Emmys and different awards. I can't even tell you what I'm looking at, but it's pretty marvelous. I'm also very proud that when I was president of the Society of Composers and Lyricists, we honored you with our prestigious Ambassador Award.
I remember that.
And that was a wonderful evening. And to this day, Alan, you continue to write some amazing lyrics. I mean, one of the honors of my life is we're working on a song right now called Leftover Love, and he's telling me he's in the midst of writing all sorts of wonderful things. And so it's not just a career that's in the past, it's a career that's ever evolving and moving forward, right?
Well, I try. When you're a writer, I've been writing songs since I'm 13 years old.
13?
Yeah. And so it's a habit I love, and I can't wait to get up in the morning and see what I'm gonna.
That's right. And I asked you what you were doing recently on Memorial Day. He said, I was writing. That's what I was doing. I said, you do something else? I was writing songs.
Yeah.
So going back to 13, now you were born in the same hospital that Marilyn was, right?
Yeah, oddly enough, Marilyn and I and Barbara Streisand were all born in Brooklyn Jewish Hospital.
Wow.
Not at the same time.
Yeah.
Years apart. Yeah, and when you're born in Brooklyn and you're Jewish, when you were 6 years old, you took piano lessons.
At 6?
At 6. I took piano lessons at 6. Marilyn took piano lessons at 6. And she became, people don't know this about her, but she was a very talented classical pianist.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and and she went to the High School of Music and Art as a piano major.
Whew. Well, I'm learning all sorts of things. I didn't realize that you were a music major at UCLA, right? You got your master's?
No, I got a master's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In music, right?
Yeah.
That was something I didn't realize. You got your master's in music at UCLA, but you went to the University of North Carolina.
Yeah.
And were you a music major while you were there? How'd you decide on the University of North Carolina?
Well, because they had a dramatic society there called the Playmakers, which was very famous. And if the Playmakers, that organization, if you wrote a musical and they liked it, they would put it on. And so that's why I went to that school, because I had a chance. I wrote 2 shows there, and they put them on.
Well, who did you collaborate with on, or did you write it by yourself?
No, I was writing both music and lyrics at that time.
Wow. So the
music was not great.
Well, I tell you, there's not too much that gets by you, though, when we're writing. I mean, you say, I want to have a lead sheet because you're sitting there. Looking.
Yeah.
You like,
Well, the song is both music and lyrics, and
exactly. So you told me we had a chance to have lunch over here, and by the way, where we are, we're in this room. This is where the magic happens, right? Is this where you and Marilyn sat and
this
wrote?
is where we sat and wrote. And at one point, that piano over there, we were going to trade it in for a new one, and Michel Legrand said, "Don't you dare."
Did he play on this piano when he was coming?
He wrote on it.
Oh, he wrote on this.
Oh, God.
Because I was envisioning that down at your living room or something. He used this piano right here.
Well, yeah, and then the finishing touches and so forth, he would use the grand piano downstairs.
But right here,
but if we made a demo or something, it would be with the piano downstairs.
Wow. Well, this is we are in hallowed halls here in this room, and I'm just pleased to be here. Now, you told me a story the other day that when you first started, you were like a director or a producer. Tell me a little bit about that. And you ended up going. There was a famous baseball game back in Philadelphia. Tell me a little bit about that part.
Well, when I was going to graduate school out here, I had spent. There was a war on when I went to college. When I was 18, I was drafted. Mm-hmm. And I spent 3 years in the Army, a waste of time. I got wounded in the Army. It was a waste of time. Anyway, when I got out of the Army, I went back to North Carolina, graduated, and went to graduate school because on a GI Bill, the government paid for your education.
That's what I understand.
In those days. So I came out here, never been to California, and spent a year at UCLA and master's degree. And I worked for a radio producer who I was kind of a gopher, getting scripts and things. And he was the producer of the Abbott and Costello radio show. Now, you don't probably know who Abbott and Costello was.
I love Abbott and Costello. Of course I do.
Okay. That was it. And there was a wonderful orchestra leader and band on the show. It was a man by the name of Matty Malnick.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, Matty Malnick played violin, and he was, before he had this job, he in the days of Paul Whiteman, he played with Paul Whiteman's band. And he and Johnny Mercer, the great lyric writer, and my mentor, luckily, they used to write when they got 15 minutes off and in the breaks, they wrote songs like Jeepers Creepers, Goody Goody.
All these classics.
All these wonderful songs. And Matty took a liking to me, and he introduced me to Johnny Mercer, who became my mentor for 3 years. I wouldn't be here without him.
Oh, what a wonderful mentor to have.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Did you learn any tricks of the trade about writing lyrics from Johnny?
No, it wasn't tricks, but, I analyzed, I knew every word he had written. He also wrote music. When an irresistible force such as I.
He wrote the music to that?
He wrote both, yeah.
Something's got to give, he did?
Yeah. And he also wrote Dream.
Yeah.
He wrote a lot of things melodically, too. Yeah.
He grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and
that's right.
Well, so he was your mentor,
Yeah.
and so this gentleman took a liking to you. He introduced you to Johnny Mercer, and at what point did you start becoming more of a producer or a director? Was that?
No, when the director radio guy who did the Abbott Costello show, they canceled. The show was over. It had a 3-year run, I think, and he went back. This gentleman, his name is Charles Zander. He went back to Philadelphia and became the vice president of WCAU in Philadelphia.
Oh.
And WCAU was the biggest and most important radio television station in the CBS network in those days. We're talking about 49, 50, all the way to 55, somewhere in there. And he called me and he said, "What are you going to do when you get out of graduate school?" And I said, "I don't know, I'm going to write my songs." He said, "How are you going to make a living?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm going to write my songs." And he said, "I'll offer you a job." He said, "You can, I'll make you an assistant director in television." And knowing you, I had worked for him, he said, "You're going to be a director in 6 months." And I was. I took the job. I said, "What does it pay?" He said, $37.50 a week. Well, in those days,
That's a lot of money, right?
1949, 1950, you could do something with 37. Anyway, I did that, and I did the WCAU was the most important station. It had a big band, a vocalist, all those musical things you could want, which delighted me. So I directed a lot of musical shows, and in the second year I was there, they made me the director of baseball. And, in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Phillies. I directed baseball, and in 1951, the last day of the season, the Dodgers were playing the Philadelphia Phillies, the Brooklyn Dodgers in those days, playing the Phillies, and the Giants and the Dodgers were tied for the pennant on the last day of the season in 1951.
I think I remember that.
And the Giants were playing the Boston Braves, and the Dodgers were playing the Philadelphia Phillies. And the Giants won early in Boston, and the Dodgers were losing, and they won finally in the 11th inning. They beat the Phillies to tie. So I told my assistant director to go to the man, because by that time they had turned the lights on. It was 11 innings, in Shab Park. They turned the lights on. And I told my assistant director, "You tell the guy who turns out the lights, I want him to turn them out one at a time, one bank at a time, left to right. And I'm going to pan the whole stadium as the lights go out."
I can see it now.
And when the last light goes out, I told my play-by-play guy, I said, "When we're in black, I just want you to say, 'Wait till next year.'" And that's exactly what he did.
Oh, I bet that was riveting.
Yeah, and I got offered a couple of jobs in New York to be a director. And I said, "I'm making enough money that I could quit and write my song.
You wanted to get back to the songwriting.
Yeah.
And we're so glad you did. Now, tell me about that song, Let's Sing Like a Dixieland Band. Now, was that in that same sector of time?
No,
after
that's when I was in graduate school.
So that was actually, was that a little bit
Before
this?
Yeah, Johnny Mercer, during his taking, being my mentor, he said, and he became, Capitol Records. He started Capitol Records.
That's what I remember.
And he said, I'm going to produce an album with Louis Armstrong and Bing Crosby. He said, well, go home and write them a duet. And I wrote a song for them to do, words and music. I came back and played it for Johnny. He said, absolutely great. They'll do it. And they did it.
I know. I've heard it since she told me about that song. I listened to it. It's a great song. Now, but Bing was a little, he wanted you to make a change.
He said I had written in that they both should scat sing.
Yeah.
And he said, I can't scat sing with Louis Armstrong. Can you rewrite it so I don't have to?
Right on the spot,
right?
Right
on the date, yeah. And Johnny Mercer, I remember Johnny said to me, welcome to show business, kid. And I went over in the corner of the studio and rewrote it so he wouldn't have to sing.
That's what I've found in my own career. We have to sometimes be able to make changes just like that. Let me give you a point in fact, just tell you a little bit about early on in my career. So I had my first shot to do a TV series over at Paramount, and this was 1978. And if you'll remember, it was kind of during that disco era. And I had written this scene. Gary Marshall always liked these kind of tender scenes for his characters. And I had written this piece of music that was really nice, but it had a disco beat. And so I said, okay, and it was over at Paramount Studio M, where you probably did a lot of recording. And when I was there, we go out, I run down this cue. It's taking place on this really tender scene. And all of a sudden I look back in the booth, and there are people on phones calling, and there all sorts of commotion going on. They said, Dan, come on in here. That is the worst piece of music I've ever heard. And I just felt my life was just going to turn around. And it was just shooting me forward into like not being a composer. I said, okay, guys, let me just have one shot at it. I went back out there. I took out all the percussion, took out all the drums, and just had the strings there. And everyone loved it. But I had to make the same decision you did by doing it on the spot, because I had 30 musicians sitting out there. They said, Dan, what are you going to do? And I took out all the rhythm. That was it. But anyway, that's a great song of yours, and I certainly enjoyed you telling me the story about it. All right, let's start moving into the period where maybe you first met Marilyn. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I was writing with a composer by the name of Lew Spence. We wrote together in the morning, and he was writing songs with Marilyn in the afternoon. And one day he decided to introduce his morning lyric writer to his afternoon lyric writer. And we met, we had lunch, and we wrote a song that day. And we didn't write with anybody else after that.
So was there immediate attraction between the two of you, or was it first just strictly?
No, it was only writing. The three of us had separate lives. Lew Spence had a girl. I think I had a girl, and Marilyn had her own life. And then we wrote a song, interesting. We wrote a song called I Never Left Your Arms. And the song said, I've been everywhere, I've done everything, and I've never left your arms. That's what the song said in essence.
Were you both working on the lyric together?
Oh yeah, we wrote.
And
Lew Spence wrote the music.
Music, okay.
And Frank Loesser, a great writer.
Oh sure.
Frank had a representative out here, a man by the name of Stuart Ostrow, who became a Broadway producer. But he was the general manager of Frank's music out here. He heard the song and he sent it to Frank. And Frank sent the three of us, brought the three of us to New York. And he wanted to put us in the contract. He said, you people should be writing Broadway shows. I want to put you under contract. And people thought we were crazy, but we said to Mr. Loesser, who was, wrote Guys and Dolls. He wrote all the score to that.
Of course.
Among other things.
He was a powerful guy in the business.
Yes. We said to him, we've just been writing together for a year. We don't know who we are yet. And we'd love to take your offer, but we'd rather wait. And not yet. He got very angry, but he said, but I have to publish that song. So we said, okay.
You gave him the publishing on that one.
Yeah.
But that was a hard decision for you to tell Frank Loesser that you weren't going to do it, because that could have opened up some doors. But you just
Well, he had two teams of writers under contract already. The people who wrote the baseball show.
Oh, you mean the damn Yankees?
Yeah.
Yeah, Adler
and
Ross.
He had them under contract, and he had Moose Charlotte and Norman Gimbel under contract.
Ah.
He had two other teams, and we felt, what does he need us for? So we turned it down. Yeah, he got angry, but
You know what? I've never heard that story before, and that took a lot of courage at that time for you to do it. Now, with Lew Spence, you wrote that face, right?
I wanted to ask Marilyn to marry me.
Yeah.
I didn't have any money, and Lew was going out with a girl. He said, I want to write a song called That Face. I said, okay, let's do it. And I said, let's do it in the style of Fred Astaire, because that's Marilyn's favorite singer in those days. And we did.
And Fred Astaire did the song.
And I got an appointment with Fred Astaire. I don't know how, but he said, I love young songwriters. I don't record anything that's not in a movie, but I'll listen. So we went down to see him, and I sang the song to him. And he owned a record company, Ava Records. Ava was his daughter. And I sang the song to him. He said, I love it. I'm going to do it next week.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And he wrote his own songs, too.
Oh, yeah.
I have a friend that's writing a book on his songs, the songs of Fred Astaire that he wrote.
Not a lot. He didn't write a lot.
Yeah, but she's putting a book together. But he must have really liked your song to do it.
Oh, yeah.
You asked her to marry you by giving her that record. That's the most romantic thing. You're ruining it for all the rest of us. But I want you to tell me where it went from where you all have your own things going on to now you're asking the woman to marry you. What happened? What transpired between those times?
We spent a lot of time together in New York, knowing each other, because before that, with three of us, Lou, Brown, and I, all had separate lives. And then we became, in getting to know each other, and we came back to L.A., and it was Christmas time, and it was, Marilyn said to me, "You got a date New Year's Eve?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, why don't you come with me? I'm going to a party." And we went to this party, and we never dated anybody ever since that night.
Well, maybe it was those walks through, what, Central Park or something?
No, it was down Park Avenue.
Oh, down Park Avenue.
Park Avenue, Christmas time, is flowers all over.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And that's where we spent a lot of time.
And then all of a sudden you're going to New Year's Eve parties, and the rest is history. All right, so I want to jump back. This is obviously goes back a little bit before that. One of the real things I wanted to talk to you about is one of the great songs that I've ever heard in my life, and it was also your first really successful song. I want to talk about, and I got a record over here. Where is this? I want to talk about Yellow Bird. Is what I want to talk about, and this is this album, Calypso Holiday, and there it is. It's like the fourth song on the first side. And by the way, I ordered this in the mail. Someone's going to be sending me this record next. So here's where I want to talk to you about Yellow Bird. Yeah. So when I was a youngster, I think I was like 13 or 14, I went to Nassau, Bahamas. And there was this calypso artist playing down there in Nassau, Bahamas. And he inspired me, just the energy and love that he had. His name was Count Bernardino. And so what happened was all those years I remembered meeting Count Bernardino in Nassau. Then 35 years later, maybe 40 years later, I went back to Nassau, Bahamas. And I said, I figured he had passed away. Maybe he had some friends I could talk to. He was still around, performing every night. Oh. Still just as, he was like 85 years old, but he had all this energy. But he told me one thing. He said, when I perform, wherever it is, he played at the British Colonial Hotel, and he played out at Atlantis, and he played at the Nassau Beach Hotel. He said, every time, the one song that everyone wants to hear is Yellow Bird. And he said, I have a taxi driver. He'll come outside my house when I'm sleeping, and he'll go beep, 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 beep. Hey, we have a man. He wants to hear Yellow Bird count. Get up and sing Yellow Bird. So I've got to hear about Yellow Bird and how all this came about, because Calvert Deal would love that I'm sitting here talking to you right now. Let's hear about Yellow Bird.
Well, Marilyn and I wrote a lot with a man who had a choir, Norman Luboff.
Right. This guy right here.
That's right. For Columbia Records. And he did a lot of folk songs. And we wrote a lot of folk songs, adapted folk songs with him.
I read about this. He did something on Aesop's Fables that you guys did.
Yeah.
And you did something based on Rimsky-Korsakov, Scheherazade, and Bronson. I read about what you did. Yeah, the Reverie album. You did a bunch of things with him. Yeah.
And so one day in 1958, there was a calypso craze in this country. And Norman called and said, we have to write 11 10 or 11 calypso songs this week.
In 1 week?
In 1 week, he said, because Columbia Records wants me to make an album called Calypso Holiday, and so we got to write them. And Yellowbird was one of these 10 or 11 songs that, and one of the reasons why it's Yellowbird is it was the folk song that he adapted musically from. I had a part of a lyric that said oiseau, the word oiseau, which in English is bird, you know. And so we said, well, ba-ba-da, yellow bird, that goes, let's go.
Came right at it.
Yeah. And so we wrote Yellow Bird. We thought, we wrote a song, there's a song in this album called Woman Sweet.
I know that song. I recorded it on this album with Count Bernardino, except it's me singing. That's a beautiful song. You told me about that song years ago.
Yeah, we thought that would be the hit. And nobody ever did that. So.
Well, I did it.
Yeah, I know
you said you kind of like my version of it, but that is a beautiful song.
Oh, it's
and Jim Gilstrap, a good friend of yours, who sang,
he did the demo.
He sang on that my record with me of Woman Sweet. But so of all the calypso songs in the world, Yellowbird is the ultimate. And Count Bernardino, they wouldn't ask for anything else. He goes, done. They don't ask me for anything. They want to keep hearing Yellowbird. And so when I went back, after I went back and recorded an album with him. And we recorded Yellowbird. And I sing it with him. And they played it down in the Bahamas. I sing, you know, "Aren't you had a pretty," you know. As you said, that was Norman's part. The first part is Yellowbird up high in banana tree. Yeah.
That's Norman.
That's Norman.
Musically, yeah.
Yeah. But Yellowbird up high in banana tree.
Yeah.
Yellowbird, you sit all alone like me. Did your lady friend leave the nest again? That is very sad, makes me feel so bad. You can fly away in the sky.
You're more lucky than me.
And the rest is history. It went to #1, right? The Mills Brothers, the Kingston Trio. Yeah. Everyone was recording that song. And it did an airline?
I think it was Northeast Airlines, painted their planes yellow and fly down to the Caribbean on our Yellowbird, and they gave us $12,500 a year for I think 3 years. So we didn't have any money.
That was serious money.
Oh,
right?
That was serious money.
But that would have been before you all got married, though, right? That was because she was. I think you told me, wasn't she the one that first met Norman and then introduced you?
Oh, yeah, she was working with Norman. Yeah, and she introduced me to Norman.
Yeah.
So we, two of us wrote with him.
Did you stay in touch with Norman through the years?
Yeah, for years. Oh, we wrote a lot of things with Norman. Songs of the World, there's folk song albums of his, a lot.
Okay, let's talk about Nice and Easy. That had to be a big song in your life with Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, Lew knew Frank Sinatra's manager. Frank Sinatra's manager said to Lew, we're doing an album of slightly swinging love songs, and we need a title song. Write one for us. You know, every songwriter from here to New York and backwards, they were told, you know. And I said to Lew, what we have to do is write a custom-made suit for Frank Sinatra. Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think I said to him, what happens if the title is Nice and Easy? Let's take it nice and easy. He said, oh, I like that. And he wrote the tune first to that, and then Marilyn and I wrote the lyric, and we did it for Sinatra, and out of all the people who wrote the title song for that album, he picked our song, and it became the first album to sell 1 million copies of Frank's.
That was his very first?
That was his very first hit album. Yeah.
And it was done over Capitol.
That was 1960. Capitol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, were you and Marilyn married by that time, or is that
Oh,
still?
yeah.
Okay.
We were married in 1958.
Oh, okay. So, were you at the session at Capitol?
Yeah, Frank called us the kids and said, you can come to the session. And we were at the session. You know, bounce open and so.
Did he do it all in one take, or did he do a couple of different
takes? Oh, no,
takes?
he did it a couple of takes.
But the orchestra was all sitting out there with him, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's the way it was done. See,
Nelson.
That's rarely the way it's done anymore.
No,
I mean,
Nelson.
Barbara probably does it that way, but in general, you know, you record the strings, you record the horns, you record the rhythm section all separate.
Oh,
but
the band was there. Yeah. And Nelson was, you know, great. Frank called us the kids, and he called us the kids for a long time after that.
Tell us about, I know that you and John Williams wrote a specialty piece for him and drove out to Palm Springs.
That was many years later. And now you're talking about, this was in 1980.
20 years later, yeah.
Yeah. He called me, and he said, Alan, would you and Marilyn write me a 10-minute number? And we said, sure. About what, Frank? And he said, about boy meets girl, boy gets girl. I said, that's been written, Frank. Let us think of something. And he said, I'm quoting him now, he said, get the frog, which means get Michel Legrand to write the music.
Why did he call him the frog?
French.
Oh.
That's why he called him the frog. And I got a call from him back about 2 weeks later, and I said, he can't have the frog because his father is very ill and he can't come. I said, what about now? I said, what about Johnny Williams? You know, I say Johnny Williams because in those days, Johnny Williams was the #1 jazz piano player in this town. When Andre Previn left, John was the #1. He's a fantastic piano player. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, I did know that.
Great jazz piano. And a wonderful melody writer. Besides, I mean, you know, since then he's become John Williams, and great and wonderful. He's a wonderful man. Anyway, I called Johnny up and said, you feel like doing this? And he said, yeah, why not? And we wrote a 10-minute number for Frank. Now, I call Frank up and I say, we've written this song for you. He says, come down to the Springs and play it for me. Sing it for me. So the three of us, Marilyn, John, and I drive down to the Springs. And Frank sits on a ottoman, and I sing to him for 10 minutes. Now, when I was a kid, I used to go to the Paramount Theater in New York, You're not from New York. But the Paramount Theater had a stage show and a movie 5 times a day.
They had both.
Yes, they showed the movie good. Then the stage would come up, and in those days, I'm talking about the big band era in this country. So you would see the movie, then the Benny Goodman band would come up, or the Tommy Dorsey band.
And come right up.
Come right up.
Come right up, and there they'd all be.
Yeah. And so I used to go to the Paramount Theater, and when Tommy Dorsey was there, Frank Sinatra was singing with Tommy Dorsey, and Joe Stafford, and those wonderful people. And I'd sit there, and I'd have to, if I wanted to, I'd pay again to sit through another show, you know. And
how old were you at the time you were doing this? In your
13,
teens? 13?
14, somewhere in there. Marilyn did the same thing. She's a little younger, but she did the same thing, went to the Paramount Theater.
It was inspirational.
Well, not only that, that's where you went. I mean, you know. So just before I would have sing 10 minutes to him, I'm thinking to myself, you know, when I was a kid, he sang to me. Now I'm going to sing.
And he was sitting there on the ottoman. And was John Williams there on the piano?
Oh, yeah. A beautiful blue piano, about a mile long, this piano, beautiful. And
had you memorized the song, or were you singing from the lead sheet?
No, I was singing the lead sheet. Singing, and I get done singing the song, and he's crying, right? And he turns to Marilyn, and he says, "How do you know so much about me?" And Marilyn looked at him and said, "Your life has not been such a closed book, Frank." And he laughed, and he said, "I can't wait to do this." Now, he was in his 80s, and when a star, not only Frank, but the older they get, the lazier they get about learning new things.
Yeah.
And he never learned it. And I told that when I made a CD with a orchestra.
Lyrically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when that came out, I did some radio interviews and stuff like that. And I was telling this story to somebody about it, and they said, and the next day, I get a call from Michael Feinstein saying, "I want those 10 minutes." And I said, "He can't have them." I said, "We wrote that for Frank, and nobody's going to do it. It's put away." Because it was a custom-made suit for him. It was about a man who fell in love with the same woman all the time. He wasn't the same, but the same great-looking. There's nobody else who lived a life like that. So
it's locked away.
It's locked away. Yeah.
Oh, God. Well, people would like to hear it.